Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for joining us for these broadcasts on the Car Dealer Magazine YouTube channel. And today I'm delighted to say we are joined by Graham Macdonald from Caterham Cars. Hello, Graham.
Hello, James. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this since we first booked this yonks ago. So Graham is the CEO of Caterham Cars. He's been in the business for over 13 years, 5 of which was as the CFO, and for the last 8 years he's been the CEO. Now, Caterham is a company which really doesn't need any introduction whatsoever, but if you are a little bit slow on this Monday afternoon, perhaps you've had a bit of a heavy weekend after the pubs opened at the weekend. As a bit of a reminder, Caterham obviously has been developing the Lotus 7 since it acquired the rights to it in 1973. And while there have been many versions of the Caterham 7 since the 1970s, it's always stuck to Colin Chapman's basic design and ethos. Now, we're going to be talking about lots in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, history of the company, how coronavirus has affected Caterham, and what the future holds for this very British car manufacturer. Now, if you're watching and you want to get involved, please do drop a question into the question box and I'll do my best to put it to Graham. Okay, Graham, right, let's get cracking then. So I'm very fortunate enough to talk to many CEOs in the car business. They frequently say to me, they always want to have more time to get hands-on with the product, and they're in constant board meetings and flying here, there and everywhere. Can you just give us an idea of what it's like to be CEO of Caterham? It must be a huge amount of fun, I can imagine.
Well, James, thank you for hosting this today, and hello to all your viewers. Yes, what can I say? Obviously, Caterham Cars is on a slightly smaller scale than probably a lot of your viewers are used to. We have a £22 million turnover business, and we produced last year 550 cars. So it's very, very small volumes. Of course, there's good and bad with every CEO's role. Yes, I have to attend board meetings. Yes, I'm summoned by the shareholders. And yes, I have day-to-day issues that we all have to deal with. However, on the other side of that, of course, I'm fortunate enough that actually I race one of our Caterhams in our race series. So I get to meet all of my customers, which on a monthly basis at the race meetings. And I work in the factory normally where the cars are built in Dartford, and I'm hands-on. And because I have only 130 staff, I know them all personally by name, and most of them have been with me a long time. So I have that personal relationship as well. So I run it very much like a family business, which is how it started. And the Nairn family founded the company, as you say, in 1973. And they sold out in 2005. I came into the business in 2007 and took over in 2012. And I run it very much like a family business. So everyone in the business is a friend of mine, as much as you can have that boss/employee relationship. And I try to meet as many of my customers because it is a passion for an awful lot of my customers as well. So I try to meet as many as I can, and I'm fortunate enough that I go racing. And the ironic thing is, as I'm going into Paddock Hill Bend at Brands Hatch, for example, and I have 4 of my customers around me, I've got to make damn sure I don't hit them, because that can be a very awkward conversation in the paddock afterwards. So I have customers who are also friends that I race against.
Yeah, I can imagine it's been an awkward conversation. I've just been punted off by the boss.
Yeah, I believe you me, there's been 1 or 2 of those conversations. And if you talk to any of my colleagues, they will call me Crashy Macdonald, which I say is not true.
I'm sure you're a marvellous driver. Let's just talk about your customers,
yes,
actually. And is there a typical Caterham customer? Because I would imagine, perhaps wrongly, but I would imagine that most customers come into the showroom or into the company HQ and they've got a fixed idea of what car they want.
Yeah.
Presumably, there's not much selling that happens, not trying to put your salespeople down, but it must be quite a different sales experience as opposed to a VW Golf or even other sports cars like Porsche Boxsters and even Lotus Elises.
Yeah. I think, without wishing to put down my sales staff, because they do an excellent job and they're having to work particularly hard at this time of life when we're coming out of the virus, like everyone else in the industry, I think. But you're quite correct. We're in a fortunate position that our competition is probably not another car. It's more like a motorhome, a jet ski, or a house extension, or a new kitchen that the other half wants in the house. So if someone walks in our showroom, they have a pretty good idea of what they want. We tend to split them, or I tend to split them into two categories. There's one that is your Sunday driver. So he wants maybe the more traditional models, which indeed we've just launched, the Super 7 1600. He'll want more of a traditional model, and he will keep it in his garage and he will clean it regularly, and it will be polished very regularly and cherished. And then he'll take it out on a sunny day only. He won't take it out in the rain. He'll take it out down the country lanes when the sun's shining. And then the other end of the spectrum is you'll have your complete speed freaks who purely want a 7 because maybe they've done track days in their 911s, or they've done track days in their Boxsters, and they've been overtaken by this silly little kit car and got mightily fed up by it. And so they come in and we sell those kind of cars to people who just want to do track days or racing. So there is two distinct kinds of customers, yes.
Yeah. And what is a bit of a cliche question here, I know, but what is the proportion of people who build cars themselves or have them, built by yourself?
Yeah. I'm sure it won't come as any surprise, James, that in the 21st century, what we find is that my customers are becoming more cash rich and time poor. Yeah. Whereas I think when you went back to the 70s, it was an awful lot. The whole tradition of work was you went into work and you did your 8 hours and you came home and you had weekends free. Whereas I think nowadays there's a lot more pressure on people to work longer hours and perhaps earn more money nowadays. So what we found is the proportion of people who build kits has shifted very significantly from kit build to fully built build. One thing that has also changed over the years is that we now sell more of our cars abroad. We sell 60% almost of our cars overseas.
Really?
Into Europe and into Japan predominantly. And we cannot sell kit cars over there. They have to be fully built for homologation and registration purposes. So that limits the market. And out of the 200 plus 250 cars we sell in the UK, I would say 50 to 60 of them are kits. And then that becomes particularly, the majority of those tend to be racing drivers who are starting off in our Academy series. We encourage our race drivers to build their own cars because it gets them familiar with setup and how the thing's bolted together. And the logic is if they do have an incident or accident, it's repairable and they can repair it themselves. Yeah. So the handful of people that build cars themselves purely for the love of it and they've always wanted to do it is very, very small. Out of the 500 odd cars, I would say it's probably 5%.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Super 7 1600 just then. And of course, that was a car that you revealed just before lockdown, really. And it always amazes me how you're able to make a special edition or another edition of a car that is even more retro than the base car, because the car itself is already very classic. You're very good at spotting trends and styles to influence your new models.
Yeah. And I think what we tried, as you rightly say, James, the 7 is a traditional car. It was 70 years old from when Colin Chapman first designed it, or it's coming up 70 years old from when he first designed it. We had our 60th anniversary a few years back, even though the Caterham 7 came to fruition in 73, Chapman had been building it from 57, so it's a very, very old car. But what we've done over the years is we have, as much as you can modernize a Caterham, but keeping it the same basic product. We have tried to, we've moved away from flared wings, we've moved away from leather seats and leather interiors and gone more carbon fiber, lightweight, probably appealed more. There was a stage about the last 5 or 10 years where we appealed more to the speed and performance. So we brought out the R400 has been with us for a while, but we brought out the R500 came out in 2008, and then the 620 came out in 2013, which was all about speed. I mean, the 620 does 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. It's kind of superbike territory. And then what we realized was we had moved away from our core, if you like, which was, as you say, the traditional historical product that it is. And so the Super 7 came to fruition. The Super 7 1600 came to fruition from that. You know, it was kind of retro inspired, mid 70s. And we wanted it to look like one of those cars and drive like one of those cars without all the hassle, you know. So it has twin Webers on the side, which actually underneath them are fuel injected. So you don't have all the problems of having to set your carburetors up and that sort of thing. So we found, again, you know, there is a market now as well for tradition, I think. You know, people they want the power, they can have the power in our R400 or 620, that sort of thing. But there's people still want the tradition and hark back. So we go back to the flared wings, we put nice leather seats in, we put a nice leather dashboard on, nice wooden steering wheels and the likes of that. And it certainly appeals to a number of our customers.
Yeah. Are you influenced by Japan? Because of course they must love, well, as we know, you know, other previous British sports car manufacturers, you know, like MG, for example, have understood the importance of the Japanese market because they love things that are typically British and typically classic. Does that ever influence the models that you create? You
have hit the nail bang on the head there, James. It's as if you almost work in the same boardroom as I do.
I'm not a Caterham fan at all.
Yeah. So Japan happens to be our largest market outside of the UK. We ship in excess of 100 cars to Japan a year. And again, you're quite right. They like the tradition, they like the heritage of Britain and the UK. And we find bizarrely that, you know, if you hark back to the early days of the 70s, a lot of the Caterhams came in aluminium with green or yellow or black wings. And we still ship traditionally an awful lot of cars to Japan in basic aluminium with green wings or yellow wings. Not many of them go painted at all. Whereas in every other market, 99% of cars are painted with some leery paint scheme with stripes or bright colours, that sort of thing. Yeah. So definitely the Japanese love the British heritage. And it was actually a conversation with our Japanese importer 2 or 3 years ago, where he said, you know what you did with the Super 7 that we had, the Super Sport, sorry, the Sport and the Super Sport. Yeah. I would love something not based on the Suzuki engine, because we did that based around the Suzuki engine. I would love something with a little bit more power, so based on the Ford Sigma engine, which is the 1600. And that's how the Super 7 came to fruition, very much with the Japanese market in mind. And we'd had such a great response from the Super 7 and the likes in 2016, 2017. So the Super 7 1600 came out, yeah.
I mean, it really is a quirk of the car industry, really, isn't it? The typical British sports car maker. No other market can actually say that they've got something like that, have they? A manufacturer that has continually improved a basic design, and it still resonates for the customer in 2010 as it did in 1973 or in 1957. It's remarkable, really, isn't it?
If anyone sat down in a board meeting and said, do you know what, we've got a model here that was designed in 1957, and I'm not going to do another model, I'm going to keep it going for 50 or 60 or 70 years, yeah. Everyone would go, that guy's gone bonkers, you know, what is he talking about? And I have to say, you know, every time we come to a new iteration of regulations or WLTP or small series regulations for us to, we sit there and we look at it and we go, well, you know, this is going to be tough, but let's see what we can do. And I've got a very, very small team of excellent engineers who have chosen to come to work with us because they just love the whole ethos of the 7. So they're determined to do whatever we can to keep the 7 as is, but make sure it complies with latest legislation in the countries we want to sell it into. And every time, by hook or by crook, we seem to get through this, and we go, wow, how did we manage that? Now on to the next thing. And then something else comes looming over the hill, and we sit down and we sit with the engineers and say, right, this is the issue, how are we going to deal with it?
Yeah.
And you know, no one in the right mind would ever said, indeed, Colin Chapman got rid of it quite quickly because he wanted to move on to other things and thought it was obsolete.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when the Nairns bought the business in 1973 or acquired the rights in 1973, they would never have thought that in 47 years' time, we would still be building them, you know. And I'm still in touch with the Nairns now because they're actually landlords of our property in Dartford. And I still talk to them. And every time we bring out a new model, they still say, I'm delighted the fact that you're still keeping this going. Yeah.
Because that's the irony, isn't it? You've got the genius of Colin Chapman, you know, and it got to the early 70s, and he thought, I've done what I want with that car, and it's old hat, and yet it's still here, isn't it? It's just amazing.
It is, and you know, I think, and I'm sure we'll touch on it in a minute about electrification and everything else. But I think, you know, our intention and my intention as the CEO of this business, having been here now in this role for 8 years, is to make sure we keep producing the 7, irrespective of what else happens within the business. The 7, I think, will always have a place in everyone's heart, and we will always be able to sell it in some kind of numbers that will justify us building it.
Now, under most sort of regulations, you know, you'd be able to get around them by saying you're a small manufacturer. You know, you could even probably get around things by, like Colin Chapman did in the late 50s, by saying, you know, it's a kit car, you know, we can get around. But there is one big thing coming in the future, which we all know, 2035, you know, banning of pure petrol and pure diesel engines. How are you going to get around that? Is that a major headache for you?
If I can be honest, James, and if there's some CEOs sitting out there, they might think I've gone mad, but if I'm honest, it's not something I'm wondering or pondering about at this moment in time. You know, for me, it's still 15 years away. Your customers who are, or your viewers who are watching this, will no doubt, most of them will realise that we don't design our own engines. You know, we use a Ford engine just now, and we have used a Suzuki engine in the past. So we use a Ford Duratec 2-litre and a Ford Sigma 1.6, as well as a small 660cc Suzuki engine. So we deal with OEMs and buy engines and drivetrain from them. So if we were ever to develop an electric car, I would see us looking to buy some form of OEM battery pack and motors. And that, I am sure, in the next 15 years, battery packs will develop, motors will develop, and it will come to the point where it becomes affordable and doable for Caterham. As we sit here just now, and I'm terribly sorry if I'm jumping ahead of you, but as we sit here just now, we've looked at electric cars, and the problem we have just now is using the current battery packs and motors. We have a car that weighs 450 to 500 kilos. The batteries would add on another 300 kilos, and you would be looking at £100,000 RRP just to cover the cost of the battery and power plant. So for us, it's not viable. But I think in 15 years' time, the development that's going on in that market means that someone somewhere will be looking to develop batteries, develop motors, and we will be able to buy those and package them in our cars.
Yeah.
In the meantime, sorry.
Okay, now carry on.
I was going to say, in the meantime, it's battery, as you say, it's doing away with internal combustion engines, I think, is the policy. And I don't know, you know, I've sat here every time and gone, oh, this is really going to be tough for us. What's going to happen? And we've always found a way around it, as we're a small manufacturer or a niche manufacturer. And who knows whether there will be legislation that allows us to carry on selling in small numbers. Even indeed whether the manufacturers, you know, if they stop selling internal combustion engines, that pretty much will put an end to our powertrain. But we're watching the space very closely. There's nothing just now on the market. We're not considering bringing anything out just now because of the weight and the cost penalties. But I am convinced in 15 years' time, my team would be able to put an electrification into a 7.
Because it's quite interesting, really. You see, like the announcements this week of last week of AC creating electrified Cobra. In many ways, what the sector needs is Caterham to come into that space and sort of lead the way, because you've got lots of small, even smaller manufacturers than Caterham saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You've even got other companies that are saying, look, we're transforming an old VW split windscreen camper van and putting an electric motor in there. For this sector to actually really take off, it does need brands such as yourselves to actually come in. But you're absolutely right about putting extra weight into the car, because that makes the car defunct, really, doesn't it? And you may be in fear of actually not destroying the brand, but ruining the ethos of the Caterham 7.
And that's exactly it, James. The Cobras who run a V8, I think, just now, or a straight six or whatever it is, they're obviously a lot heavier, they're a lot bigger. So they probably could package a battery pack and motors and it wouldn't make too much difference to the product. Indeed, similar to the VW campers that are being done, there's old traditional cars. Weight is not necessarily a factor in that. But if you add 70% additional weight into a Caterham 7, it completely destroys the ethos of the product, which is just add lightness. It's about lightweight and agility. And until we can do that, we will resist joining the electrification bandwagon, because I don't feel it's right for the product. And we could do it, as I say. It's got a weight penalty. It would have a cost penalty, and I'm sure there might be people out there that would buy it. But I think there's an awful lot of people that go, do you know what? I just don't see the point, because it's not a Caterham anymore.
Yeah, I do hope we're able to get to the stage where Main Street, yes, by all means, bring in legislation such as this, and it makes the normal A to B car, it's got to be electric. I just hope that governments can see, once we get closer to that deadline, they can see that a tiny little Caterham, even with a 3-cylinder Suzuki engine in it, it's not a problem, is it? And I hope that there can be different rules, and it will allow typical British sports cars or whatever low volume production cars to carry on, because it's going to be a very depressing place, I think, if there are no more fun cars anymore.
I think you're right, and I think, James, the issue you have is that the politicians are getting younger, and people of my age, into my mid-50s now, grew up tinkering with cars when I was 17 and 18 years old, and I'd have the bonnet up and I'd be doing this and doing that and changing this and changing that. Nowadays, the youngsters of today, and I include my son who's in his mid-20s now, he's never looked under the bonnet of a car because he's never shown any interest. For him, it's a functional object. It gets him from A to B. And that's the worry, that the politicians coming through in another 15 years' time will be all the youngsters who have never had to open a bonnet, never tinkered, and won't understand what's going on. But for me, if you look at our cars, not only are they arguably high performance in inverted commas, but even the Suzuki, as you say, a 660cc engine, which is very, very clean anyway. Yeah. But the amount of miles they're driven every year is probably they're all on limited mileage insurance. I would say most of my customers are probably on under 2,500 miles a year. So it's just totally not comparable to your average day car. And most people, I would have thought, and me included, I would be happy to go to work in my autonomous electric vehicle, sit on the M25 as I drive to Dartford, with a car taking me to the doorstep without any hassle and grief. But what I want to do is come home at the weekend and enjoy myself and go out and have a little bit of pleasure with the engine noise, the smell, and everything else. Knowing that, yes, it's not as clean as a battery car, but actually I'm driving for a few hundred miles a year, not thousands and thousands of miles. So I would like to hope that there is someone sensible in the policy-making department in the government at the time who says, do you know what, there's an awful lot of jobs in this sector and this engineering jobs. And why don't we do something to protect them and allow them to sell in small volumes? Because that's all we do. We're probably one of the bigger, smaller volume manufacturers, building 550 cars. But Morgan, I think, is slightly bigger than us, but Ariel's lower, and there's an awful lot of smaller ones than that. And And surely there must be some happy medium whereby we're not going to kill the earth by driving 1,000 miles a year in a Caterham 7.
Yeah. How do you view the sports car market at the moment? Because the wider sports car market, because of course you've got manufacturers who have invested a huge amount in it, not least Renault with Alpine, and of course we all know that the Caterham's involvement with Alpine. Unfortunately, that car hasn't really taken off in the UK. Do you think that is a sign that people are they're being turned off with mainstream sports cars?
I think again, a couple of things here. Really sad about the Alpine because it was a brilliant car, and the one thing I continue to tell everyone who asks me about that project is the one thing I'm proud of, despite us falling out midway through and Caterham vacating that project, it was my engineers that were responsible for the ride and handling.
Yeah.
So, you know, I still wave my little flag and say, obviously, ultimately, Renault finished it off, but my engineers were involved in doing that. And I think they've done a fantastic job, because I think just about every journalist says it's such a sweet car to drive. Yeah. I think the trouble is, James, as I was saying earlier, similar sort of thing. The general mentality of the public now as they're growing up is about environmental issues and looking to save the planet. And I think sports cars perhaps are becoming a little bit of the wrong thing to be seen in. You know, it's about, everyone might hanker after having a Boxster or a 911 or an Alpine or a Mercedes or whatever it might be on the drive, but actually the peer pressure of your neighbours and your family and your friends probably is starting to push back against that with everything going on, and I think that's a sad place to be, because you know there's something in this world for everyone, and just because you like something doesn't mean everyone else has to, you know. And I think for the manufacturers, the cost of continuing to develop, the cost of legislation and everything else, it will effectively push this segment and out, you know, and there'll be less and less buyers just because of peer pressure and consumer pressure.
Yeah,
which is a sad thing.
It's a shame people don't think like that with SUVs. Stop buying SUVs and buy sports cars.
If only they knew, isn't it? You know, this big 2.5 ton thing, 2-ton car running down the road and what it's doing to the environment. But no, everyone thinks that's the way to be. Yeah. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame. And you know, there's some lovely, lovely cars being developed out there, but I think it's a shrinking market, unfortunately. And I think that will make it tougher for us as well, because whilst we're not battling with your Boxster or your 911 or something like that, because they've just got so much more technology and so much more development gone into them, the whole sports car market is under pressure, I believe, from just the general consumer feeling about it.
Yeah. But there is an argument to be said that they're perhaps not always, but for a very long time in the future, I think there will still be a place for a back to basics, visceral driving experience. Possibly, we may even get to the stage where cars like the Caterham 7 actually, there's a newfound interest in them, because if the standard car isn't quite doing it for people, and it's a bit of a reaction from those cars, and what better reaction is than a Caterham 7 to a big inflated electric SUV? Who knows?
Exactly. As I said earlier, you know, I would love to go to work in my automated electric car, come back home, but then actually what I want to do is go out and have a drive, and be in control and feel the wind in my hair and hear the noise and smell the smells. And that to me is pleasure on a Friday evening or a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning or something like that. And I don't mean hearing down the roads at super speeds. It's just about accelerating down an A road and all the sounds and the senses that go with that. And I sincerely hope, and I think like you, and I hope like you, that's what happens. People will be happy to go in their box to work, nice and safe, nice and comfortable, do their day's work, come home, and then actually they want to go out and experience themselves where they're in control and it's unadulterated fun. Yeah.
Final question, Graham. It's really about lockdown and about coronavirus. I talk to many dealers on these car dealer lives, and they say, look, obviously they weren't able to sell cars, well, not physically sell cars face to face during lockdown. Yet when they reopened on June the 1st, they've now been busy delivering cars. There's been pent up demand. What has that been like for Caterham?
And funny enough, exactly the same for us. We had a couple of experiences through the lockdown. I furloughed probably about 96% of my staff. I had a couple of marketeers who had to deal with the Super 7 1600 launch because we were pregnant with that. So I retained my marketeers, and myself and my colleagues remained on, and one or two other staff. And we ended up going into the showroom. Personally, my co-director on the commercial side went into the showroom and did a transaction on a couple of used cars, because we had customers who called us and said, I want to buy a 7. And there was one instance where a customer had been struck down with a disease, lay in his hospital bed recovering, and said, that's it, I want to buy a car. Contacted us through the website, and my commercial director went in and did the deal with them in the showroom, let them look around the car, let them have a test drive, and the car was sold during lockdown. But that was the odd incident where we had a load of pent-up demand we saw when we came back, and it has been particularly buoyant, bizarrely, in the used car sector. Funny enough, we're taking new car orders, but we seem to be selling an awful lot more of used cars. So I think there is a pent-up demand. I think people have maybe, who have thought about buying the likes of a 7 in the past, but never quite got around to it, have suddenly realised, you know what, life's too short. I'm going to go out and enjoy it while I can, and I want it now while the sun's shining, and not wait 6 months until I can have my new one delivered. So it's been refreshing, and long may it continue.
Yeah, long may it continue. I think we have to leave it there, Graham, but that has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for your time, James. It's been a pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much indeed. So on Wednesday, we've got Rachel Clift from the automotive charity Ben. And on Friday, we're going to be speaking with Stephen Corwood from Motor Connect. Now, if you want to get involved and have a chat with me, just like Graham has done on Car Dealer Live, then please do get in contact with me. My email is james.batchelor@blackbullmedia.co.uk, or you can email James Baggett, and he's james@blackbullmedia.co.uk. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us again, and I'll see you Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.